Hello, welcome everybody to Perspectives, third-party political and otherwise talk show with Bill Redpath from the Libertarian Party. I'm David Rich from the Green Party. We have a recurring guest on from my other shows, radio shows, and the Green Party series, Dr. Mary J. Ruwart. Mary, how are you?
I'm good, thank you, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure talking to you. I so enjoy it. You're the real deal. That's why you're highly credible. You have a PhD in biophysics, and there's no higher credibility when it comes to the sciences than that. So you spent 19 years working for a pharmaceutical company and other. You have two books, at least two. Is it more than two?
Three. I have three.
Three books. Three books out,
Yes.
which are each one worth reading. And you two know each other because you're both part of the Libertarian Party.
Going way back.
And I'm allowing myself to be vulnerable here. If you guys gang up on me, but no, I'm just kidding. The last time we were on this show, I'm like, we gotta start disagreeing because we're agreeing on everything. Me and Bill, it's not even. We gotta heat this up a little. Maybe next time. Anyway, so can't hear you.
Oh, you can't hear me?
I
can hear you, Mary. Okay, now there you are. No, you're fine.
I hear. Okay.
Okay, cool. So, Dr. Ruwart, why don't you tell us about your experience getting into this very specific and prestigious field? Maybe kind of like a summary of your experiences with the government in healthcare, specifically the lab you worked for.
Yes, well, I worked for the Upjohn Company for 19 years, as you mentioned. And of course, I had to interface with the FDA. Yeah. And I found that, well, at least back then when I was interfacing with them, they tried to evaluate drugs, but things have changed. In 1992, it had begun to take so long to get a drug to market and was so expensive that basically only a few companies were able to take drugs to the market, and that's the only companies that the FDA trusted. So the little biotechs that were actually doing the innovative research had to hand off their drugs to the bigger pharmaceutical industry, what we call now big pharma.
Right.
And because it took so long, it took about 14 years to get a new drug from the lab bench to the marketplace. And so they passed in 1992 the Prescription Drug User Fee Act. This allowed the companies to basically get about a 1-year jump on their competition by paying a fee that started out at $100,000. And last I looked, it was almost $3 million. Whoa. So about 70% of the salaries of the people who evaluate new drugs is now paid for by the pharmaceutical industries. So consequently, the FDA considers pharma their client, not the American people, not Congress. The people who are funding them is basically pharma. And this has really changed everything. And we saw how this worked in COVID, where the FDA gave the emergency use authorization to a really poorly tested, what they called a vaccine, but isn't a vaccine by our normal standards because it didn't prevent transmission or it didn't stop you from getting COVID. In fact, it's now known that the more shots you take of this mRNA vaccine, the more likely you are to get COVID. It's got what we call negative efficacy, yes, which means that you're more likely to get COVID. And of course, the shot itself has incredible side effects. And some of these are things like Bell's palsy. Of course, in younger people, it's myocarditis. And I speculate that maybe the reason that the younger people, those who are teenagers or under 50 are getting all this myocarditis and resulting in heart attacks in many of them is that the younger healthy body is making more of the spike protein. And, the spike protein, the mRNA that helps you create the spike protein is supposed to go away very quickly, but it doesn't because they have this lipid nanoparticle coating it. And this was designed to deliver chemotherapeutic drugs to the brain. So it actually goes all over. It doesn't stay in your arm. And now they've got studies suggesting that even a year out, you may still be making spike protein after you take this. And the spike protein is inflammatory. It is toxic. So people who are taking these shots are at long-term risk, not just short-term, like I've been talking so far. And some of those risks, of course, we don't know yet because the shot was only tested for a couple months. Normally it takes, something like 7 to 10 years to get a vaccine out. And even those vaccines are not very well tested. But this one just took a couple months, and then they gave the placebo arm the so-called vaccine. So we don't have these groups to compare anymore. And so this is very tragic because the VAERS system, the Vaccine Adverse Reporting System, is now showing that the so-called COVID vaccine has more adverse effects than all of the last 20 years of vaccines put together.
Oh my.
Normally, if in the olden days when I worked in the pharmaceutical industry, the FDA would have pulled these probably about 2 months after they were introduced to the American public based on the side effect profile. But that did not happen. In fact, there's been a lot of denial of the side effects. So people are at risk. And there is new data coming out now on the nursing homes and showing that the nursing homes were not experiencing much COVID until after they started getting the vaccine, and then their cases went up and people died. So the whole thing has been a total disaster. And I probably could go on, but that's the things that have been reported, except for the nursing home data, which is new. It's all been reported in the medical literature. It's not some conspiracy theory or something I'm making up. It's documented. And now they're starting to talk about the possibility of turbo cancers, which is really hard to decide if that's happening because of the shots. But oncologists are reporting that they are seeing people in remission getting extremely aggressive cancers after the shot. And in fact, my own brother-in-law did get the shot when my sister was up here visiting me, and his cancer was supposed to be very slow growing, but it was very rapid. Now that's anecdotal. I can't say it was absolutely due to the vaccine, but I'm suspicious given what I'm hearing from oncologists these days. So that's the shift in the FDA. It went from over-regulating pharma capturing it with the 1992 amendments, to basically letting things that it normally would never have allowed on the market to be on the market and kept on the market.
Mary, let me just ask you a question. Let's say, what would your recommendation be regarding people getting more boosters, COVID boosters? I got the double shot from Pfizer. Okay, there was the originally double shot from Pfizer, and that was back in 2021. Okay, that was about the middle of 2021, and then I got a booster 6 months down the road. So now we're December 2021. Since then, I've not had another injection, but I see these. I was just back in Washington 3 weeks ago, riding on the metro, and there were these signs, urging people to go get boosted with get more COVID vaccines. I haven't done it yet, but to somebody who, I'm 65, almost 66, good health as far as I know, what would be your recommendation given what I just went through regarding getting any more COVID boosters?
I'm guessing she's going to say, don't get them. Right?
Well, actually, I can only tell you what I would do because I'm not an MD, I'm a PhD. And so if I gave you medical advice, I could be sued. Okay. So let me tell you what I would do. I wouldn't get another booster, especially these new ones coming out, because they have not been tested in people. and they contain twice as much mRNA, at least twice as much as other shots. So in other words, if I took these boosters, I would reasonably expect as a scientist to be making twice as much spike protein as I would have in the past. And why should I do that when they don't work to prevent COVID for me? And they have some pretty horrific side effects, especially if you're healthy. And I say that because they found, for example, that the myocarditis is, if your body weight is normal and you have good muscle as opposed to just, fat, then you are more likely to make more spike protein, which means that you would be more likely to have myocarditis. The spike protein has been found in the hearts of people who have died from the myocarditis. And by the way, the myocarditis is not mild like the government is telling us. Most cardiologists say that in 10 years, 50% of the people who have it will be dead. And remember, we have teenagers getting it, so it's not trivial. The insurance companies are reporting that the workers who have group life insurance, which of course is only for professionals usually, that they have started getting about 30 to 40% an increase in the disability and death from people in that 21 to 49 age group. Now, they say that a 10% increase would be a once in a lifetime event. So 30 to 40% is huge. I don't know how they're staying in business, but this is, these are a lot of safety signals that I'm talking about, what we would call safety signals in the I guess you'd say in the profession, the jargon that we use. And no one's looking at it. In fact, the only people who are looking at it are people who are usually vilified in social media and by the government. And in several cases, doctors have had their license taken away for suggesting that people who have had damage to because of the shots, or people who don't want to take the shots and they've prescribed ivermectin for these people. And, that's been enough to threaten their license. So that's very sad. In fact, I consult, and I have had to take on some medical board cases, not for COVID, but for, the medical boards really, they become a political body. Sure. That's what I guess I should say about that.
Yeah. Real quick, going back to something you said earlier, I'm not going to remember what it is. Let me ask you this: Do you know if the insurance companies? I mean, the insurance companies have some of the best abilities to collect data because everything is so dependent on statistical distribution and prediction and that kind of thing, which is cool. Do you know? Are they accounting for the fact in their budgeting that what they're advocating for is going to cause a lot more damage that they're going to have to pay for with it in, say, like the next 10 years? I mean, do you know if that's happening? Are they concerned? Well, whoops.
I hope so. Okay. I hope it's happening, because otherwise these companies will go bankrupt if they're not planning accordingly. In fact, some of them may. It wouldn't surprise me if they did. I mean, that's a huge I was going to say, I'm trying to say accurate. I'm not saying it right.
Liability?
Yeah.
Actuarial.
It's a nightmare. It's a nightmare, because how can they plan when they're getting this crazy thing going on? This what they call a black swan event.
Right.
It's very scary, and
it is scary.
I have to tell you, this age group that we're talking about is like, usually it's significantly healthier than the employed population of the same age that don't have this type of insurance, because as I said, usually this insurance is only available to professionals. I had it when I was at Upjohn. You might have had it too. So because of that, when you look at the employed people that don't have this insurance versus the ones that do, you find that the thing is flipped. Now, the people who don't have this insurance are healthier than the people that do. And you just don't see a flip like that normally.
Interesting.
So it's really scary.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah, like I just, and I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent. Phil, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. I have a question. If you want me to go ahead, I'll ask.
No, go ahead. I was just gonna bitch about insurance companies. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. All right. Mary, suppose you were benevolent dictator of the world back on March 1, 2020. How would you have handled the COVID pandemic? I mean, I take it you would agree that it was very serious respiratory flu, and it was legitimately called a pandemic, I would say. But how would you have handled public policy in dealing with COVID back at the get-go?
Well, I would not have
vaccines. Before there were vaccines, how would you have handled it?
Yes, what I would have done is pointed out to people that as soon as that information was available, that one of the best things they could do to prevent themselves from getting very sick or dying from COVID was to make sure their vitamin D levels were high. It turns out that if you have, I think it's 67 nanograms per ml vitamin D, which most of us don't have actually, I'd say most of the population's under 30.
Ooh.
So yeah, kind of scary. So, and of course, those in northern climes are, worse off. So, if you keep your vitamin D level up, you're less likely to die. Also, of course, there is early treatment. In other words, as soon as you have symptoms, if you start taking ivermectin and zinc, they kind of work together. So ivermectin opens up your cells to the zinc. The zinc gets in, which it normally doesn't in great quantities, and it kills the virus. So the virus doesn't replicate, and you have 2 or 3 days that you might feel a little off, and then you get better. So that's a very good thing too. I would advise using that instead of doing what our government health agencies did and basically told pharmacists not to fill those prescriptions if they were for prevention or treatment of COVID. And of course, then having the medical boards take them to task. In fact, the FDA turns out broke the law a couple times during COVID by having these weird advertisements like saying this is a horse paste, and you shouldn't take it. Well, ivermectin won the Nobel Prize in medicine.
Yeah.
Because it was so good. It really changed the whole face of malaria. But it's not just good against malaria. It's good against, a lot of parasites and viruses. I foster feral kitties, right? So, I'm exposed to some stuff. So I would have I'm glad to know about ivermectin because I start taking it just to make sure that periodically I'm cleaned out, because I get bitten and scratched, and of course I'm scooping the litter boxes and things like that, and I want to be safe, so I've been doing that. But this is a really important drug. It's very safe. It's really hard to take too much of it. And in fact, when Trump talked about hydroxychloroquine, and I don't know how this study got funded or passed their IRB, but there was a study with hydroxychloroquine at lethal doses that they knew were lethal. Now, I sit on an IRB, and for those of your listeners who don't know what that is, it's a review board. Nobody can do human research in this country and most of the Western world without going through a committee that looks at what you're planning on doing and make sure things like the dose of drug you're giving is not toxic, and that your study will actually have good results, and that the informed consent that the subjects get, which is about 20 to 30 pages long, lists certain things like nobody can force you to be in this study. You can quit anytime. You can't be kind of bribed or coerced into getting into this study. And of course, the government violated all of these principles when it mandated the so-called vaccine. Telling people they couldn't work if they didn't do this. And the reason we have these IRBs and this oversight is because of what Germany did during World War II. And even since World War II, our government has done a number of things that have violated these, these codes and the things that they haven't even gone through the committees. Okay. So, it's really horrible what's been done. And a lot of people have died in some of these studies because, they haven't been careful. And the government feels like it doesn't have to be careful. And now we have it violating all these principles that every week, I'm supposed to uphold for the pharmaceutical companies. And of course, if you look at the data that Pfizer, at least I haven't looked at the Moderna data yet, but the Pfizer was very careful about how they worded what they turned over to the FDA. They said it was not tested for transmission and stopping the virus. They said it quite clearly, and yet you heard all of our politicians saying that this would prevent you from killing grandma by giving her COVID.
Right. No, I absolutely agree. I had personal experience of friends who, before they had me into their house, have you been vaccinated? All right. And it was my understanding that vaccinated people were just as prone to pass the virus as unvaccinated people. But that was standard thinking out there, that people had to get vaccinated to stop the spread.
That's right. Well, and our politicians said that. I mean, I've seen clips this year of Fauci in 2021 and the CDC head saying, if you get this vaccine, the virus will stop with you. You won't be able to give it to anyone else. It's just totally untrue.
Yeah. And didn't it, even without vaccination, like, wasn't there still like a 97 point something % survival rate?
Yes, even for people who were elderly, as long as they didn't have comorbidities. The average elder person who died of COVID had 2.5, I think the number was, comorbidities. Right. So that's a lot. And the comorbidities are things like hypertension, diabetes, things like that. In other words, cancer, serious conditions.
Right. And
so go ahead. I was just going to say, if you're older, you didn't need to worry.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, how many people, I knew 6 people who supposedly died of COVID.
Oh, my.
Yeah, 6. Mary, did you know anyone who supposedly died of COVID?
I don't know. I don't think so.
I knew people that had it, but it was like a bad cold or the flu. I don't know anybody that I can think of. I would think I would remember that.
Well, I do remember that my younger brother did get the vaccine, and he had such a bad reaction, he did not get the second shot. So
I was okay with the first shot. It was the second shot that of the Pfizer that they said that basically that was worse than the first. And I got it in the morning, and I will have to say that by 4 PM, I was pretty out of it. It lasted a few hours, maybe from 4 to 8 PM. I was really feeling punky, but then I rallied late in the evening. But I did have a several hour reaction to the second shot.
Interesting. Yeah, I didn't have any negative reactions. And like, I think we talked about the time I had you on the Green Party series is like, I think you just asked me if I had gotten vaccinated. And I said, yes, I did, because I just didn't know who to believe. I was getting so much for as high level as your credibility is, I mean, I don't know anything about Dr. Fauci other than he's a doctor too, and that kind of thing. I mean, I don't have enough of the wherewithal or knowledge about the inner workings of it's like all this information you just gave us. Some of it I remember from talking to you before, but some of it I don't. And so I'm like, well, I don't know what to do. I guess I'll just get the vaccine. And now you're saying, I guess like die in 10 years.
Well,
kind of thinking what's that?
There are protocols you can take
Like
if
what?
you feel like you have been compromised by the vaccine. What I would suggest, I actually brought it up so that I could tell you, the Frontline COVID-19 Critical Care Alliance. It's FLCCC. They have protocols for early COVID treatment and for post-vaccine treatment if you feel like you've been injured by the vaccine. So I would say if anyone out there feels like they need to get the vaccine or the booster that's coming up because they're afraid they'll lose their job, well, go to that website and check it out, because that is, just put FLCCC in your search engine and you will get information about the Frontline COVID Critical Care Alliance, which is what their actual name is. And when I did that on Google, it was the first thing that came up. So FLCCC.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'm definitely going to check that out. And I mean, I take a lot of, in part because of your recommendations and how healthy you are. I take some supplements too. I take a ton of vitamin D. So hopefully that will help.
On that point, I know, as Dr. Ruwart said, she is an MD. There's an old saying about PhDs.
PhD.
No, she's not an MD. She's a PhD. It reminds me of the old joke about the son of a PhD who said, "My father's a doctor, but not the kind that helps people." And so, in any event, but my question is this: there's this. What about multivitamins? Okay, I take a multivitamin every day. I think it's chock full of vitamin D. I'm going to look after this show. I can tell you that. But there's zinc in there. There's other magnesium. There's a whole bunch of stuff like that. Should I be taking this? But I guess so. It's in the vitamin. But there's a story that has that multivitamins are just a waste of time. It's a scam. What's your opinion?
Well, I'll tell you, I got a very strange sickness in grad school, and we never found out what it was, but I was down for a month. I mean, I crawled to the bathroom. It was that level of, I couldn't stand up straight, And while I was laying in bed, I read all these books on nutrition and other stuff because I was like desperate. The doctors aren't helping me. And I started taking lots of vitamins and changed my diet, and seemed to work. And of course, I kept doing it, and I think it's helped me. I'm 70, almost 74 now, next month.
It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing.
What's your birthday?
October 16th.
Oh, okay. I'm October 9.
Okay. We're Libras. Yeah.
Exactly.
Libras, you're balanced. Nice.
Yeah. So I think it's helped. And part of the impetus to do something like that is, in our family, we have a lot of cancer. We're one of those families that I've lost 2 younger siblings to it already. Both my parents had cancer. Myself and the next sister in line have had 2 bouts of cancer. So, we've tried really hard to stay healthy and be able to get early detection, because of course that's the secret. And I'm happy to say that my 2 youngest siblings don't have any signs of it, so I'm crossing my fingers. But cancer on both sides of the family. So, I have a lot of incentive to do something different. And I feel like it's worked. I've way outlived my mom, for example. And yet I got breast cancer basically the same age she did. But
Wow.
I made it and she did not.
Yeah, that's I think I'm like the genetic dumping grounds for my family. I mean, we didn't have cancer, right? Like all the things. I have type 2 diabetes, high cholesterol, liver enzymes, congestive heart failure, blah, blah, blah. And it all, I mean, not saying I live a very good lifestyle because I don't. But I could always just point at my mom and say it was her fault. But that's why I don't think, regardless of the vaccination, I'm not sure I'm going to make it past the next 10 years anyway. But I want to say something else too, real quick. This is separate from what you were saying about like the 1992 act where they had to pay like some sort of fee to like do certain, follow certain avenues of research and so on, which really isolated the smaller labs. Which is just, I mean, again, this is like, everybody says that we live in a free market. No, we don't. I mean, that's like, how rigged is that sector now? I mean, it's ridiculous, Anyway, I also do know, I just want to point this out because this is a third-party talk show, that 70% of donations from lobbyists to Democrats come from the pharmaceutical company.
That's probably
70%.
true. I don't know, but it's probably true.
Yeah, no, I can't cite you my source right now, but I try to be careful when I hear or read things.
Sure.
So that's usually why I go in with some sort of confidence about it. But yeah, anybody can check that and then correct me if I'm wrong. But that's why when I complain about like Tom Hartman and Stephanie Miller shows, is two like liberal talk show hosts, which I mean generally I enjoy. But like they just wail on third parties all the time, and they're just ignoring all the data that goes with the duopoly and how ridiculous. I don't even need to point out the Republicans because they're so obviously ridiculous. But people like the Democrats are just as bad. They're just better at hiding it. They really are. So that's my little third party rant for the show.
Right. There's not a dime worth of difference, right?
There really isn't.
Wallace said. So anyway, that maybe there's a quarter now due to inflation, but anyway. But what I was going to say is Big Pharma. Do you think Big Pharma gets a bad rap? I mean, these are people, highly intelligent people, working hard. I think that they got to be working hard. These drugs don't invent themselves. But yet it seems like Big Pharma is constantly being attacked by politicians as if people have a right to these drugs. We certainly want good healthcare for people. Certainly outstanding healthcare for people, but it just seems to me that Big Pharma has done so much to make our lives healthier. It seems to me, on the whole, they get bad rapped a lot. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think the industry's changed a lot since I was in it. What I saw, as you know, I wrote a book called Death by Regulation, how we were robbed of the golden age of health and how we can reclaim it. And the thesis of that basically is that as the regulations increased around pharmaceutical drugs, not only did it take longer and cost longer, but it changed the character of the pharmaceutical industry. Like when I started, the people who were in charge of deciding which drugs would be put on the market and which wouldn't was the scientists who knew what was going on, right? Well, what happened is, as these regulations increased and the cost of getting an FDA approval rose so much, they started bringing in more accounting people, MBAs, and those people and the marketing people started making the decisions. And the reason they did that is that you couldn't just put a drug on the market anymore and assume that it was going to recover its development costs. But the thing is, these people did not necessarily know very much about science. So what happened in our company, at the Upjohn Company, is we, the scientists, were pushing for making certain prostaglandins, a drug which you took into your stomach to replenish the prostaglandins that were naturally there and protected them from getting ulcers. I mean, so it was a topical application to your stomach. It was perfect because These things break down quickly. You don't want them to be all over the rest of your body. You just want them in the stomach. So this way you could give a natural one that would break down quickly but protect the stomach. There was no Tagamet on the market at that point. There was, none of these blockers, acid blockers that we have today. And it would have made lots of money. But our marketing people said, nah, there's surgery for ulcers. We don't need a drug. And so Tagamet, when it went on the market, became the best-selling drug of all time. So we could have beat them to the market. And of course, once Tagamet came out, it would probably have replaced the prostaglandin, but we probably could have made quite a bit of money in the meantime. But we didn't, because our marketing people didn't understand that people would rather pop a pill than have surgery and be out of work.
I was going to say that's rather
kind of a no-brainer.
We don't need that medicine. They cut somebody open to fix it. Who cares?
That's like ridiculous. Reasoning.
Yeah, I could tell stories, but what was happening? I did that to illustrate something, and that is that the people that were being brought in to make sure that we weren't developing something that wasn't going to recover its costs didn't really always know and understand what was possible and what would go on. And so some bad decisions were made, and those bad decisions are still being made. And so if you have bean counters making these decisions, you have a whole different culture, and that's what we have today. And I believe that is why we've had things like some of the problems with the opioid crisis, which really was basically, from what I can gather, I wasn't part of that, so I don't have firsthand knowledge, but from what I can see, the people who put that out did know that it was addictive and did know that it would be a problem, and they did it anyway. Now, that's not something that would have happened probably at the company I worked for, because it was still a family company, and reputation was very important to them. And back then, reputation was everything. I mean, if you got a bad rap for putting out a crappy drug, your stock crashed and stayed down. It didn't come right back up because, we didn't have all these 401ks and these other managers kind of saying, oh, let's take advantage of this crash. People were, it was individuals who were investing their own money back then. And that meant that they didn't want to invest in a company that was putting out bad stuff. So that's not the case anymore. You see, there's a lot of changes that kind of go together in this country, and I'm sure in others too, that factor into all this. So yes, I guess I would say that big pharma deserves some of that rap. The other one is Vioxx. When they put Vioxx on the market, supposedly as a safer drug for the stomach. That was the idea, and that type of compound is useful in some cases, but they knew, back then there was pretty good evidence that it was going to cause heart attacks. And even one of the FDA examiners went to his boss and said, we can't put this on the market because it's going to cause heart attacks. And his boss said, well, the pharmaceutical company, they are our clients now, and we will put it on the market. And of course, they had to eventually withdraw it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So
the culture's changed.
Yeah. So let me just ask you, you had a lot of contact, I believe, with FDA employees over the years. What did you think of them?
Some of them were really great, and some of them were really crummy. Okay. So on the crummy side, we got a letter. We had asked the FDA permission to go ahead and test these prostaglandins that I talked about earlier in ulcer patients to see if it would help heal the ulcer. The FDA examiner wrote us back and said, well, you really need to do this in healthy normals. And I had to write the letter back very politely saying, well, the thing is, we're really trying to see if it heals ulcers. So we really need to use ulcer patients.
Mhm.
Yeah, so that's the crummy side. But on the other hand, um, shortly after the patent that I had put together for prostaglandins and liver disease was approved by the patent office, I got a personal call from the FDA examiner for the GI section. And they said, Dr. Ruwart, we understand that you have filed a patent for prostaglandins and liver disease. I said, yes, that's true. And they said, well, we are so excited about this because there's nothing for liver disease except bed rest, and that doesn't work. Uh-huh. So we're going to do everything we can to help you get this drug to market. And I was young and naive, so I believed them. But the thing is, even though they wanted to do that, they were bound by the practices of the FDA, of what had happened already and what was sort of institutionalized. So what we did is, of course, this is the thing. When you really find a new drug, or you think you found a new drug that does something no one else's drugs will do, you have a problem. And in liver disease, the problem was, well, this disease takes a long time to happen, to build up. It takes a long time for the liver to really get pretty sick. So it was going to take probably a lot of time for it to come back too. And meanwhile, we didn't know what dose we had to give, how often we had to give it. We didn't know how many years we would have to wait to measure something, to check and see if the liver was doing better. And at the time, all there was biopsies. There wasn't a very good blood chemistry indicator. So, and you can't just punch holes in a person's liver and take biopsies every year. It's not a good thing.
Yeah.
So we had to develop all that understanding. And the problem we had is if we guessed wrong on just one thing, we didn't know how many people we needed to show statistical significance. And if we guessed wrong on just one thing, and we ran this study, which would take years, and we didn't get statistical significance because we guessed wrong, we'd have to start all over, because at that point in time, you had to have 2 United States studies showing statistical significance. And the problem is, if we had to repeat the studies, the patent would be expired by the time we got to market, and everybody else could market it, to be basically go generic the first day, right? So we never recover our costs. So we didn't do it, even though in later years there was a lot of evidence that probably would have been very beneficial. Mm-hmm. So this is the problem with the long timeline. And so, one of and the expense, because, you spend all that money and you miss the mark because you guessed wrong on something. And this is what happens when you have a truly innovative drug. And most people don't realize that. And what's happening now, because of the way the system ended up working, is the big pharma companies have been working with the FDA for so long. The FDA trusts them, but the smaller biotechs, they don't trust them. The FDA won't trust them. So the biotechs generally hand off their inventions to big pharma, because big pharma can take the hit. Right now it's something like, it's probably larger than this now, but last I remember, $2.5 billion to get an FDA approval for one drug.
Whoa.
Yeah.
I hear what you're saying. I lost my lifelong best friend to liver cancer 8 years ago. And I think it was hepatitis C that I heard afterwards, perhaps when it was diagnosed, he didn't follow doctor's orders, is what somebody who knew him said to me. And it's so frustrating. I mean, that would have helped, but now isn't hepatitis C curable now with drugs?
Yes. I don't know what the percentage cure rate is, but I do know people who have been able to resolve that.
Yeah, that's just so tragic to have that situation today. Thank goodness we have that situation, but to know that if we'd had that years ago, he might still be with us.
That's right.
If you were to change the FDA, what would you do?
I'd privatize it.
You
What I
privatize it instead of just getting rid of it?
Yeah, well, see, here's the thing. As long as you have one opinion, which is what you get from the FDA, and that they can tell you to market it or not, you're going to have corruption eventually, which is what we have now, right? So if you have competition, on the other hand, and you have liability, well, then you have a lot of incentive for the companies to put out products that work and products that are safe. And there's a lot of different ways to demonstrate that. According to the FDA, the only way you can do this is to do, a double-blind, placebo-controlled study. But their case reports work just as well. I mean, one of the things that happened before the FDA got its teeth in 1962, from the 1962 amendments, is drug companies gave samples to physicians. They tried it on patients that had the disease that it was meant to treat. And then they would report back to the company, hey, this thing worked like a charm, or it didn't work at all, or something in between. And then the company would make a decision. And of course, because reputation was so much more important back then, the companies, did not want to put something on the market that was unsafe, and they did not want to put something on the market that didn't work, because it would hurt their reputation, and it just wasn't worth it. So, that system, believe it or not, when you compared before and after the 62 amendments to the Food and Drug Act, there wasn't much of a difference. I mean, most researchers think there was no difference at all. But the most difference that somebody purported to find was about 10%, which is really pretty small. Yeah. So it didn't make a difference. You don't need that. Physician judgment back then, maybe not so much now, seeing how some of the doctors handled the COVID situation. But that was adequate. So why are we jumping through all these hoops that are so expensive? Well, part of it was that when Congress funded the FDA was kind of between a rock and a hard place, because every drug has side effects. And if the side effect came to the attention of the American people, they'd write their congressperson, and then Congress would get on the FDA. So the FDA said, okay, this is a no-win situation for us. If we approve a drug, we take a risk. So what we're going to do, but if we don't approve any drugs, then people are going to be mad at us too. So what we'll do is we will think of every single study we can that might find a side effect, and have the companies do that. And so that's why it started taking longer and longer and longer for the drugs to get to market. And that's the way the FDA protected itself, or tried to protect itself.
So it'd be a model like this is always an example that libertarians use, Underwriters Laboratories, right? Isn't that a private organization that sets standards for electrical equipment? And it seems to be doing rather well. Yes,
and not only that, there is a group, the Abigail Alliance. The FDA refused to let Abigail, a young woman, take a drug for her cancer that was specifically tailored to her cancer until she was on death's door. Well, her father was really upset about this, because that drug probably would have saved her life. Mm-hmm. And so he started this alliance. And what they do is, these are lay people, right? They review the studies on clinicaltrials.gov, and they have predicted that 40 cancer drugs should be approved by the FDA 2 years before the FDA approved them. So the evidence was that strong already 2 years before approval. So if a consumers group can do that well, just imagine what some scientists might be able to do. if they were part of a certifying organization.
Well,
And the
but
nice thing about
that's
Yeah.
my question, though, Mary. Do these lay people are they qualified to read these studies and understand them sufficiently?
Well, clearly somebody is in their group, because all these 40 that they recommended be approved 2 years before they were approved, all of them were approved. The FDA finally did
Okay.
approve.
Okay. I mean that's a good measure of their credibility for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, I mean, sure. I mean, I wouldn't have expected that result, frankly, but
Because some of these studies can be very high in like mathematics and abstract reasoning and that kind of thing, and not a lot of people are able to do that.
right. But of course, the cancer studies tend to be, I think, maybe more easily interpreted.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if you understand some basics of statistics, statistical base rates, and distributions like that, you can get pretty far in some of these studies because a lot of it has to do with like out of 10 people, X happened and Y happened and blah blah. It's not that difficult. It just the jargon gets a little, people get lost. They don't know what does this word mean. But okay, no, that's great. I mean, that's very cool. And it's terrible that father had to go through that. Like, I mean, that's stuff like that really makes me angry. Like, I mean, like, no, your daughter can't do this. Why? The doctor said it was okay. Like, who are you that you think you get to make this decision? Like, who the hell are you in the FDA that you get to tell a doctor what to do about medicine? It's ridiculous.
Well, particularly with people in a terminally ill situation, I mean, it's time to pull out all the stops without question.
Right, but they don't do that.
Yeah. like try anything.
The FDA claims that they approved 98% of the compassionate use exemptions. That's what it's called when you go to the FDA and ask for that. But yeah, they approved Abigail's a couple days before she died, and that's kind of how they do it.
Right. So they get to go on record saying, "Well, we did approve it," and then walk away from the microphone.
Exactly.
Yeah, you know how I just saw this too, and again, you can check it. Pharmaceutical companies get pretty good subsidies from the government, again, whether it be like just sort of like rigged breaks or like tax breaks or just directly given money to them by Congress, as well as agriculture and like all sorts of sectors or markets in our country. And what I read recently is that sum total for all the subsidies that the government gives, whether all of these things together, is $100 billion a year.
Whew, that's a lot.
That's stupid. That's just so absolutely insulting. People like hate so much, have this like, the understanding of socialism and they don't like it and blah, 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 this, that, and that's fine. I'm not trying to defend socialism necessarily, but what they don't realize is that we do have socialism in this country. It's just socialism for like big markets or big companies or stuff like that. They get all sorts of breaks from the government, right?
Sure.
Okay.
Right. Oh yeah, everything. In fact, I'm always amazed every day I hear new things that are subsidized. Like, I mean, one of the things I keep thinking is, wow, we must really be productive for the government to be able to take that much money out of our pockets to subsidize somebody else, or to go to war in this country or that country. And I mean, if we had, of course, I do estimate how much money we'd have without taxes and healing our world. And the most conservative estimate is we would have twice as much, but the more realistic estimate is we'd have about 8 times as much. The upper end is in 16 to 20 times. Wow. I mean, can you imagine? Okay, just imagine now you have 8 times as much wealth as you currently do. Just imagine.
I would have about $800.
But I mean, whatever. You have a car. You have a house.
I'm teasing, but yeah, no, that's awesome. That's amazing. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's unimaginable. I mean, you can't even imagine how you'd spend that money, because if along with that money, because it's not really about money, it's about wealth. And what the wealth is the cure for cancer.
Right.
What the wealth is we go to other planets. What the wealth is just imagine it. We live to be 150. That's really where the wealth is, right? That's what when you when you say you would be 8 times wealthier, it doesn't have anything to do with the amount of money you have to spend on the toys we have today, if you want to think of it that way. Because what we would have so much more that we almost can't imagine it. Because of course, when you look around you, you think in terms of what you see, but it's what you don't see that we're losing.
Right.
It's what you don't see.
That's right.
Yeah, no, health and longevity are like kind of top there on the list of human values, healthy and longevity together. Not, I mean, if you're 150 and you're just like, you've laid in a bed for the last 50 years, I wouldn't find that personally qualifying me for, I wouldn't like that. But
that though, I mean, Mary, in your opinion, are we on the verge of life lengthening, life enhancement pharmacology? That I've kept hearing about it, and I remember reading an article in Barron's, a few years ago about this. But will it be, in your opinion, will it be common for people at some point in the future to live into their 120s or 130s?
I think so, and we know some of the tricks already. And the best trick of all, if you want to live a long time, is caloric restriction. You eat about 80% of the foods that you really want every time you sit down to a meal.
Yep.
And if you do that, it throws your body into a slightly different biochemistry. And some people don't like to do that at every meal, so what they do is intermittent fasting, which probably will work just as well. I personally prefer to eat regularly, so that's what I try to do.
So we need crappy cooks. Is that what you're saying?
Eat what?
We need bad cooks.
So you eat less. So you eat less food.
We should all be eating back in our high school cafeteria. We'll eat less.
Yeah. A little rectangular pizza. No. Yeah, no. That's really interesting. I've read. I used to work at a health food store, and I would, during the downtimes, I just read as much as I possibly could. I remember coming across that, and then again watching it. It's some stuff on studies done by actual scientists and nutritionists and so on concerning caloric restriction. Not something that I'm going to personally do, but actually I try. I'm on Trulicity now for my diabetes, and it's very, very effective. I've literally lost, as of this morning, 19 pounds in 2 months.
Wow,
because it just curbs your appetite. Like, I'm just not hungry.
What was that? What are you taking to curb your appetite?
Trulicity, which is it's supposed to bring help with the insulin regulations in your body.
Okay.
And besides my blood sugar numbers going down, which is fabulous, I've lost 19 pounds, and like with little conscious effort.
Yeah,
I just don't like. So it's by default turned into like an intermittent fasting sort of thing. Like, let's say I'll eat in bed before I fall asleep. I might have a piece of fruit or something. So let's say I stop eating at midnight because of my work schedule. I don't even need to leave my house till noon, and I'm not hungry for another 4, 5, 6 hours. So I've met my 16-hour thing just by natural disposition, which is the best way to do it because you don't have to force yourself to do anything. It's fabulous. And so that I've started altering my diet to be more healthy. I still drink too much, but I mean, whatever.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mary.
I was going to say the one thing about caloric restriction is you can't just eat junk. In other words, it's
just one Big Mac a day isn't going to cut it.
Yeah, basically you want to have a very nutritious diet and caloric restriction. I mean, because if you have a crappy diet, you're going to lose a lot of the benefit of the caloric restriction. And I did find. Oh, go ahead.
No, well, I think I said this on this broadcast earlier, or streaming, whatever you call this, a few weeks ago. One of the great advancements over the course of our lives is better diet drinks. Okay, like I drink this is 0-calorie Minute Maid sugar-free lemonade. When we were kids, diet drinks sucked badly
because all we had was sweet and low aspartame. Now we have stevia and
Now you can actually drink calorie-free drinks or very low-calorie drinks that taste good. Big difference from 50 years ago.
From Tab to the current recipe for Diet Pepsi, yes.
I think I remember back when there were no diet drinks. I know I'm dating myself, but
Uh,
we didn't have that. We had sugar and everything.
Yeah.
That was the way it
Sugar's
was.
so nasty. It's too bad. And you know that the sweeteners nowadays on average are 600 times sweeter than sugar. It's not the sweetness of sugar that we're actually missing. It's the taste of sugar itself. These things
Maybe
are much sweeter. I mean, like a lot sweeter, easily. You can tell. I know I have to use a lot. Like I use 2 packets of like stevia for my 12-ounce cup of coffee, where before I'd have to use like 3-4 tablespoons of sugar to get the taste I wanted. Now it doesn't taste as good because sugar just tastes better, I think. But it's not the sweetness that's doing it. Not even close. Wow, that was an hour, guys, ladies.
Now,
gentlemen.
one more thing that I
Yeah.
found. Now
Yeah.
I don't know if this will apply to everyone. A heavy weightlifting program actually changed my metabolism, so I actually could do some fasting, which shocked me. I mean, you do this weightlifting, you think, oh, I'm going to be starving, but no, I wasn't. I actually was able to go to bed without dinner for the first time in my life.
You weren't
So
hungrier after lifting? That's interesting. Okay, very cool.
No, I know. Now I don't know if everybody will react that way, but I suspect that my body biochemistry isn't sufficiently unique, that there won't be some of you listeners out there that could benefit by that, which is why I mentioned it.
Yeah, no, for sure. No, yeah, I mean, I've lifted weights before. My favorite exercise was always swimming. I was really good at it. I got into shape like that, cardiovascular, all your muscles and body, like all in the same routine. Problem is like you got to go there, you got to change your clothes, you got to take a shower, you got to swim for an hour, you got to get out, you got to drive. It's like a 2-hour-a-day process, which just became annoying for me. So I stopped doing it. But it's extremely healthy and very good for you. And the cool thing about any sort of like muscle building exercise is that, along with a healthy diet, you're going to constantly build muscle. So like every exercise you do, every time you do that exercise, you've actually moved forward by one, say, which I always thought was a very cool way of kind of keeping me into it. It's like, okay, I just progressed. We're like on a weight loss thing. It might take you a week or two to notice anything or whatever else. It's not immediate, but every time I go in there and I lift, I curl, I know my biceps have gotten bigger. It's pretty cool. Just say little pep talk there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So right on. Well, very cool. I wish we had, I mean, I guess we can talk a little more. I don't know. I know Bill's wants his evening martini.
Well, he knows me too well.
So, so I guess we're just going to have to wrap it up. Mary, if you'd hang on, I want to ask you a more of a personally directed question after the show. Is that okay?
Okay, sure.
Cool. All right. Well, everybody, thanks for tuning in to Perspectives. Dr. Mary J. Ruwart, thank you so much again. Always so fantastic and interesting and fascinating talking to you. You have so much, again, credible knowledge. And for a long time, credibility has always been very, very important to me. It drives me nuts when somebody like chimes in on something that they know nothing about. It drives me batty. And I was a bartender for a long time, so I heard a lot of that crap. Okay. I'm like, really? I mean, where'd you get that from? Oh, I have no idea what you're saying to you. So, so thank you very much. I appreciate
Absolutely.
that.
Thank you, Mary.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, you're welcome. You're welcome. And
thank you.
My knowledge evolves too. When things first came out, the shots first came out, I didn't know what to think, but now I do.
Yeah. And you're right. More studies and more things are coming out in the literature and the news all the time. You're probably not going to hear it on the mainstream media because they, that's all rigged too. So that's why, smaller shows like this are very important. That being said, that you're ready for tuning in Perspectives, third-party talk show with Bill Redpath of the Libertarian Party, and I am David Rich of the Green Party. And of course, Dr. Mary J. Ruwart, our guest tonight, is also a Libertarian. And we would love to have you back on where we can talk a little more, again, about things we actually disagree on. So like, I don't know, global warming or something. I don't know, whatever it is.
Creating trouble always at David Rich.
That's right. Anyway, everybody, next time, take care of yourselves. All right.
All right. Thanks. So long.
All right. Good.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Good night. End of the stream here, and there is a delay, so don't say anything incriminating.